The kingdom of Nyavala was a land of breathtaking beauty, known for its golden fields, ancient forests, and rivers that shimmered like liquid silver. It was a kingdom where magic flowed through the land, where the people lived in harmony, and where the royal bloodline was deeply respected. At the heart of this kingdom was Princess Adanna, the only child of King Obadel. She was loved by the people for her kindness, intelligence, and strength. Unlike many princesses, she spent time among the villagers, learning their ways, listening to their struggles, and ensuring that her father's rule remained just. But in the grand palace, not everyone adored her. Queen Zulica, the king's new wife, envied Adanna's beauty, wisdom, and the love she received from the people. She'd come from a distant land, bringing with her secrets that few in Nyavala understood. With a heart filled with jealousy and ambition, she resented that Adanna was the rightful heir to the throne. She wanted the kingdom for herself. When the king fell mysteriously ill, his once strong body weakened day by day. The palace physicians could find no cure, and whispers of dark magic spread through the court. With the king too weak to protect his daughter, Zulica saw her chance. She began to spread rumors that Adanna was cursed, that her presence was the reason for the king's suffering. At first, the people dismissed these lies, but Zulica was cunning. She planted fear in the minds of the nobles, twisting truths, turning allies into enemies. Before Adanna could understand what was happening, the court had decided she must be banished. The princess was dragged from the palace in the dead of night, her royal garments stripped, her name all but erased. The royal guards, once loyal to her, now followed Zulica's orders without question. They led her to the edge of the forbidden forest, a place no one dared to enter. Legends spoke of creatures lurking within, of voices that whispered in the dark, of souls that entered but never returned. As she stood at the edge of the looming trees, Adanna turned back one last time, hoping for mercy. But there was none. With a final command, the guards pushed her forward, leaving her alone in the darkness. The last thing she heard before they vanished was Zulica's voice in the wind, a quiet, triumphant whisper. "You were never meant to rule." Then the trees swallowed her whole. Darkness surrounded Adanna as she stepped deeper into the forbidden forest. The towering trees twisted toward the sky, their branches forming a tangled prison above her. The air was thick with mist, carrying unfamiliar whispers that sent chills down her spine. Every rustling leaf and distant howl reminded her this was no ordinary forest. She was utterly alone. She pressed forward, her bare feet sinking into damp earth. Hours passed, but there was no sign of an exit. The hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the cold night air clung to her skin. She had been raised in a palace of warmth and comfort, but now she was just another lost soul in a place where mercy did not exist. A sudden movement in the shadows made her freeze. Golden eyes flickered between the trees, a predator watching her. She held her breath as a massive creature slinked from the darkness, a black panther, its muscles rippling beneath its sleek fur. It stalked toward her, slow and deliberate. Adanna did not run. She locked eyes with the beast, refusing to show fear. For a moment, the panther simply studied her. Then, as if satisfied, it disappeared back into the shadows. Relief washed over her, but it did not last. A storm rolled in, the wind howling like unseen spirits mourning a lost soul. Rain lashed against her skin, and the path beneath her feet turned to slippery mud. She stumbled, fell, and crawled forward, gasping for breath. The storm showed no mercy, pushing her deeper into the unknown. Then, through the storm, she saw it. A faint glow in the distance. Golden lights flickered through the trees, floating like stars brought to the earth. They moved, as if guiding her somewhere. Too weak to question it, she followed. The lights led her to a massive stone doorway, hidden beneath thick vines. Strange symbols, ancient and unreadable, were carved into its surface. The door stood partially open, revealing a dim passage beyond. Adanna hesitated. The forest had nearly killed her, but was what lay beyond any safer. A sudden gust of wind whispered against her ear, almost as if something unseen was urging her forward. She had no other choice. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air changed. The scent of damp earth faded, replaced by something warm, almost electric. The whispers of the forest fell silent. A strange golden light filled the passage ahead, beckoning her forward. She did not know it yet, but she had just stepped into a world beyond her imagination. The passage led Adanna into a vast underground cavern where the air shimmered with golden light. The walls were covered in glowing symbols, pulsing as if alive, and strange blue vines twisted around ancient stone pillars. The deeper she walked, the more the space around her changed. What once felt like a tunnel soon opened into a breathtaking valley bathed in sunlight. Before her stretched a hidden kingdom, a city built into the cliffs, with waterfalls cascading into clear pools and golden towers rising toward the sky. The air was warm, scented with wildflowers, and unlike the eerie forest she had left behind, this place felt alive. She had found Elanga, a kingdom lost to time. Before she could take another step, figures emerged from the shadows, warriors clad in dark armor, their faces partially hidden by carved wooden masks. Their weapons gleamed in the sunlight, their movements silent and precise. Adanna raised her hands in surrender, unsure if she had stumbled into safety or danger. One of the warriors stepped forward, a tall man with piercing amber eyes. He studied her closely before his gaze dropped to the royal birthmark on her wrist, a crescent moon encircled by 3 stars. A murmur spread through the warriors. "She bears the mark." More figures appeared from the village, scholars in flowing robes, children peeking from behind their mothers, and elders whose eyes widened in shock. Whispers rippled through the crowd, their voices thick with both awe and uncertainty. Could it truly be her? The prophecy speaks of her return, but she is only a child. Before Adanna could ask what they meant, a commanding voice cut through the whispers. Queen Naima stood at the top of a grand stone staircase, her presence exuding power and wisdom. She was unlike any ruler Adanna had ever seen. Her skin was the color of rich earth, her silver-white hair cascading in thick braids, and her golden eyes glowing with something ancient. She descended the steps with slow, deliberate grace, her gaze never leaving Adanna's face. When she spoke, her voice was both soft and unyielding. "You have walked a path few survive, child of Neavala, but your journey has only just begun." Adanna's heart pounded. How did this queen know her name? Why did these people speak of prophecies and fate? Queen Naima gestured for her to follow, leading her through the city. As they walked, the queen revealed the truth. Elanga had once been part of Neavala, but centuries ago, they had sealed themselves away to protect their knowledge, their people, and something even greater. Adanna's arrival was no accident. The queen placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You are not here by chance, Adanna. You were meant to find us." A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time, she began to understand that her exile had led her to something far greater than herself. Adanna had spent her life in a palace, surrounded by silk and luxury, where her greatest challenges had been learning courtly manners and royal diplomacy. But in Elanga, she was no princess. She was a student, a fighter in training, a girl who had to prove herself. Her instructor, General Kwame, was a towering man with scars crisscrossing his dark skin, each one telling a story of battles fought and won. His voice was sharp as a blade, and his patience was as thin as a dagger's edge. "Strength is not in bloodlines, girl," he told her on the first day, tossing her a wooden staff. "It is earned." Her training began at dawn. She ran with the warriors, her breath burning in her lungs. She learned to wield a bow and arrow, her fingers blistering from the strain. She trained in swordsmanship, her hands raw from gripping the hilt too tightly. She fell, she failed, she bled, but she never gave up. When she collapsed from exhaustion, Zuberi, a young warrior with quick reflexes and an even quicker wit, helped her to her feet. He was unlike the others, always offering a smirk when she faltered, but a hand when she needed it. "You fight like someone who has never thrown a punch in her life," he teased after sparring with her. "I haven't," she admitted, wiping sweat from her brow. He laughed, but then held up his sword. "Then it's time you learned." Days turned to weeks. Her arms became stronger, her aim became sharper, and her movements became swifter. The clumsy girl who had once stumbled through the forest was transforming into something new. One night, as she sat by the fire, the elders of Elanga spoke of Niavala. They had been watching from afar, knowing that darkness was spreading through the kingdom. Queen Zulica's rule had grown cruel, the people suffered, the land withered, and whispers of something far more sinister lurked in the shadows. "She has been poisoning the king, hasn't she?" Adanna asked, her voice low. Queen Naima nodded. "She seeks more than a throne. She seeks power beyond imagination." A chill ran through Adanna. Her father was dying, her people were suffering, and she had been cast aside while a tyrant ruled in her place. "Your fate is tied to both Elanga and Niavala," Queen Naima told her, her golden eyes piercing through the firelight. "You were never meant to remain in exile. You were meant to rise." Adanna clenched her fists. For the first time since she was banished, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt purpose. The night was quiet, but Adanna's mind burned with questions. The more she trained in Elanga, the more she realized that her stepmother's betrayal was deeper than she ever imagined. She had always believed that Zulica was nothing more than an ambitious woman, hungry for power. But now, the truth was unraveling before her. Zulica was something far worse. One evening, Queen Naima led Adanna into the sacred archives of Elanga, a chamber carved into the heart of the mountains. The walls were lined with ancient scrolls, their pages brittle with time. The air smelled of ink, dust, and something else. Old magic, alive and humming. Naima unrolled a scroll and laid it before her. The inked illustrations depicted a dark figure cloaked in shadows, standing over a dying king. "This is no mere legend," Naima said, her golden eyes reflecting the dim candlelight. "It is your reality." Adanna leaned closer, her breath hitching as she read the words beneath the image. It spoke of a secret bloodline, one that had been banished from Niavala centuries ago. "Zulica is not just a queen," Naima continued. "She is a descendant of the shadowborn, a forbidden bloodline of sorceresses who once sought to control the world through dark magic." A chill spread through Adanna's veins. "The shadowborn," she whispered. Naima nodded. "They were nearly wiped from existence, but some survived, hiding in the shadows, waiting for their time to rise again." Adanna's hands clenched into fists. It all made sense now. Why Zulica had appeared so suddenly in Niavala, why the king had fallen ill so quickly, why she had feared Elanga's people so much. "She has been poisoning my father," Adanna realized, her voice tight with fury. "Yes," Naima confirmed, "and she is hunting our people because she knows what they are capable of. She fears the power of Elanga because we are the only ones who can stop her." Adanna's mind spun. Her stepmother wasn't just a cruel woman. She was a threat to everything. She had stolen the throne, tormented the people, and was using dark magic to bend fate in her favor. But Adanna wasn't the same helpless girl who had been cast out. She had trained. She had learned. She had grown stronger. And now she had something Zulica didn't expect. An army of warriors who had been waiting for the right time to strike. Adanna met Naima's gaze, her voice steady, her purpose clear. "Then we must stop her before she destroys both kingdoms." Adanna stood at the edge of the training grounds, gripping the hilt of her sword. Her heart no longer wavered. The frightened princess, who had stumbled through the forbidden forest, was gone. In her place stood a warrior, a leader, a queen in the making. Each morning, she trained harder than the last. Her strikes grew sharper, her movements swifter, her resolve unbreakable. She sparred against the best warriors of Elanga, and though she still fell, she always got back up. "Your mind must be as strong as your body," General Kwame reminded her. "A warrior fights with their heart, not just their blade." But it wasn't just about strength. Adanna was preparing for war. The people of Elanga had lived in isolation for centuries, hidden from the world that had forgotten them. Many had been reluctant to fight for Nyavala. Why should they risk their lives for a kingdom that had abandoned them? It was Adanna who convinced them. "I was cast out, left to die," she had told them. "But I found my way here. I have trained among you. I have bled beside you. Nyavala is my home, but so is Elanga. And if we do not fight, Queen Zulica will not stop until she destroys everything, including you." Her words ignited a fire within the people. The warriors sharpened their blades. The blacksmiths worked through the night, forging weapons that had not been used in generations. Elanga, the hidden kingdom, was preparing to step out of the shadows. The night before their march, Queen Naima summoned Adanna to the temple of the ancestors. The walls were covered in golden carvings, telling the story of Nyavala's greatest rulers. At the center of the chamber rested a weapon unlike any Adanna had ever seen, a curved sword with a blade of obsidian, its edge gleaming with an unnatural glow. "This sword once belonged to your ancestor, Queen Amani," Naima said, lifting the weapon with reverence. "She was Nyavala's greatest ruler, the last to unite the two kingdoms. Now it belongs to you." As Adanna took the blade in her hands, a warmth spread through her body, like the spirits of her ancestors were awakening inside her. "You are ready," Naima said. "Lead your people home." At dawn, Adanna stood at the head of the army, her sword strapped to her back, her warriors lined behind her. The gates of Elanga opened for the first time in centuries. The path ahead was clear. They would march to Nyavala. They would face Zulica, and Adanna would reclaim what was rightfully hers. The sun rose over Nyavala, casting golden light on a kingdom that had suffered under Queen Zulica's rule for far too long. Adanna stood at the gates, her warriors behind her, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. Gasps and cries of shock spread through the streets as the people of Nyavala saw her. "It cannot be. The princess, she lives. Adanna has returned." The castle guards hesitated, confusion and fear in their eyes. They had been told she was dead, that she had perished in the forbidden forest, and yet here she was, standing strong, leading an army. But before the people could rally to her side, a chilling laugh echoed from the palace steps. Zulica. She emerged from the grand balcony, her emerald robes billowing, her eyes burning with rage and something darker, pure, unrestrained power. "You dare return, child," she hissed. "You should have stayed in exile." She raised her hands, and the sky darkened. Black mist twisted from her fingertips, spreading like a storm across the battlefield. The ground trembled. Her army, no longer men, but twisted, corrupted beings, emerged from the shadows. Their eyes glowed red, their movements unnatural, their very presence seeping fear into the hearts of those who beheld them. But Adanna did not waver. "For Nyavala!" she shouted, raising her enchanted sword. Her warriors roared in response, and the battle began. Steel clashed against steel. Arrows soared through the air. The warriors of Elanga fought with precision and strength, their years of training proving superior to Zulica's twisted magic. Adanna cut through the battlefield, her sword glowing with the power of her ancestors. And then she saw her stepmother waiting for her. Through the chaos, Adanna ascended the palace steps, her heart pounding. She had trained for this moment. She had suffered. She had grown. She had become something greater than a lost princess. "You cannot defeat me, child," Zulica sneered, dark mist swirling around her. I am power itself. She unleashed a wave of black energy, and Adanna barely dodged. The magic scorched the stone where she had stood moments before. Zulica struck again and again, forcing Adanna to move, to anticipate, to fight not just with strength, but with strategy. You taught me cruelty, Adanna said, blocking a deadly strike. But Elanga taught me something stronger. With one swift move, she dodged a final attack and struck back, her sword piercing through Zulica's defenses. A surge of golden energy erupted from the blade, overwhelming the darkness. Zulica let out a final, piercing scream as the magic she had bound herself to consumed her. And then, silence. The dark clouds faded. The corrupted soldiers collapsed, lifeless. The people of Nyarlathotep stared in awe as their oppressor was no more. Adanna, breathless, lifted her sword one last time. Nyarlathotep is free! Zulica stumbled backward, clutching her chest as dark energy crackled around her, unstable and erratic. Her once commanding presence was now a shadow of itself, her power weakened by Adanna's strike. But she was not finished yet. Her lips curled into a sneer, her emerald eyes filled with malice. You think you have won, child, she hissed. You are nothing without me. I made you. The ground trembled beneath them. The sky darkened once more as she lifted her hands, summoning the last of her power. Black mist twisted around her like writhing serpents, coiling tighter and tighter, and then she vanished. A stunned silence filled the air. Had she escaped? Before Adanna could react, the wind howled through the ruins of the palace, a haunting sound that sent shivers down the spines of all who remained. A deep voice rumbled through the land, one that did not belong to any mortal. She belongs to us now. From the depths of the forbidden forest, shadows stretched forward, moving like living creatures. Whispering spirits swirled around Zulica's fading form, their voices an eerie chorus of judgment. Her eyes widened in terror. For the first time, the great sorceress knew fear. No! No! She shrieked, clawing at the air, trying to escape. But the spirits would not be denied. The very magic she had used to control others now turned against her. The darkness she had wielded dragged her into the abyss, a realm of endless shadow, where she would never return. With one final, desperate scream, Zulica was gone. The black mist dissipated. The land, once tainted by her evil, breathed again. A golden light shimmered from within the palace. The people gasped. The king! Someone cried. Adanna turned, her heart pounding, and raced inside. In his chamber, King Osi stirred, his once pale skin regaining warmth, his breath steadying. The poison that had bound him for so long was gone. His eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in years, he looked upon his daughter. Adanna. His voice was weak but full of emotion. Tears blurred her vision as she fell to her knees beside him, grasping his hand. Father, I have returned, she whispered. The king, still weak, managed a small but proud smile. You have done what I could not. You have saved Nyarlathotep. Outside, the people of Nyarlathotep gathered, their voices rising in joyous cries. They had suffered under Zulica's rule, but now hope had been restored. The gates of the palace opened, and Adanna stepped forward. The people knelt before her. Long live Queen Adanna, they chanted. She lifted her sword high, the blade gleaming in the morning sun. Her journey had been painful, but she had emerged stronger. Nyarlathotep was hers, and the kingdom would never fall into darkness again. The winds of change swept through Nyarlathotep, carrying whispers of a new era. The war was over. Zulica was gone. But for Adanna, her journey was far from finished. She stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the kingdom she had fought so hard to reclaim. The people rejoiced, but there was still one final decision to make. Nyarlathotep had been saved, but what of Elanga? For centuries, Elanga had remained hidden, cut off from the world, its people forgotten by history. They had risked everything to fight for Adanna, yet their place in the future was uncertain. Would they return to the shadows or step into the light? Adanna already knew her answer. That evening, she gathered her council, warriors, elders, and scholars from both kingdoms. Niavala and Elanga share more than just history, she told them. We share blood, we share strength, and now we share victory. It is time we share a future. A hush fell over the room. No ruler had ever spoken such words before. Elanga will not be forgotten. It will not fade into legend again. From this day forward, we are not two kingdoms, we are one. There was silence, then a roar of approval. The kingdom of Niavala and the hidden land of Elanga would stand together, united at last. In the months that followed, Adanna worked tirelessly to shape this new era. She established a grand council, where warriors and scholars from both lands would advise her, ensuring that neither tradition nor wisdom was ever lost. Trade routes were opened between the kingdoms. The hidden knowledge of Elanga, its healing arts, its magic, its strategies, became a foundation for Niavala's future. The once isolated warriors of Elanga became Niavala's protectors, training a new generation to defend their land. With time, the two kingdoms blended into one, stronger than they had ever been apart. And Adanna, no longer just a lost princess or a warrior seeking vengeance, became a queen like no other. The people flourished under her rule. Justice was no longer a privilege of the few, but a right for all. Wisdom guided the sword, and strength protected the weak. The myths of Elanga and the history of Niavala merged into one great story, a tale of unity, of courage, of a warrior queen who refused to let the past dictate the future. Years later, children would sit by the fires, listening to the elders tell the legend of Adanna, the princess who was cast away, the warrior who rose from exile, the queen who forged a new world. And so, under the golden sun of Niavala and the silver moon of Elanga, two kingdoms became one, bound not by blood, but by destiny. The years passed, but the name Queen Adanna never faded. Her story was told in every village, every palace hall, and every training ground where young warriors learned the way of the sword. She was no longer just a ruler, she had become a legend. The elders spoke of the princess who had been cast away, of her trials in the forbidden forest, and of the hidden kingdom that embraced her as one of their own. They told of her return, her battle against the dark sorceress Zulica, and the day she united Niavala and Elanga as one. But Adanna's legacy was not only in stories. Even as the years greyed her hair and deepened the wisdom in her eyes, she never stopped training the next generation. Every morning, she would rise before the sun and walk to the royal training grounds, where young warriors stood at attention, eager to learn from the greatest warrior queen who had ever lived. Strength alone does not make a great warrior, she would tell them. A true warrior fights not for power, but for those who cannot fight for themselves. She taught them the art of battle, not just with swords and bows, but with strategy, discipline, and honor. She taught them the history of their people, both the struggles and the victories, so that they would never take their peace for granted. And she taught them that no kingdom could stand divided, for unity was the greatest strength of all. Under her reign, Niavala and Elanga flourished. The two kingdoms, once separate and hidden from each other, became inseparable. Their warriors stood side by side. Their scholars shared wisdom. Their people lived as one. No enemy dared threaten them, for they knew that the land was protected by warriors, trained in Adanna's ways. No ruler dared challenge them, for they knew that the kingdom's strength lay not just in swords, but in its people's unbreakable will. And so, the legend grew. Even in distant lands, travelers spoke of the warrior queen who had once been a lost princess, the ruler who had risen from exile, the leader who had brought justice to her people. One evening, as the sun set over the palace, Adanna stood at the highest tower, gazing at the kingdom she had built. She saw children laughing in the streets, merchants selling their goods, warriors training in the fields. She saw the people strong, united, and at peace, and she knew she had fulfilled her destiny. With a satisfied smile, she turned away from the view, knowing that her story would never be forgotten. Long after she was gone, her name would still be whispered in the wind, carried in the hearts of those who believed in courage, justice, and unity. For as long as the sun rose over Niavala and the moon shone over Elanga, the legend of the warrior queen would live on.